All right. Well, welcome everybody to our Tuesday talks. This is February 25th, 2025. I'm really excited to bring back our young audience discussion. The last time we had this conversation was in November of 24, led by Craig and Peg, and it was a great turnout. It was one that we did not record. It was very conversation style, but we are going to continue this young audience conversation and somewhat change the topic up every time we do it, but be on the lookout for these every few months or so. Craig will always be taking the lead with these, and we hope to continue to invite guest panelists. So I'm going to introduce this session, and then I'm going to pass it off to Craig. We are going to have some discussions with our panel, and then we want to make sure we leave plenty of time at the end so folks can ask questions. And for anybody who doesn't know who I am, I'm Jessica Rosenblatt. I am the Executive Director of the Ohio Arts Professionals Network. Thanks again for joining us today. All right, today's Tuesday Talks is family programming, investing in the long game. So our panelist today, our technical host here is going to be Craig. He's over at Marathon Center.
If Bob wants the
Performing Arts. We've got Christine Cox from C Squared Entertainment. David Mitchell from the Performing Arts Center at Kent State University at Tuscarawas. We've got Gary Minyard from Dayton Live and Tara Bailey from Bailiwick Booking Agency. Well, welcome everybody and welcome all of our guests for joining us today. I'm going to pass the baton to Craig. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Jessica. We have, as Jessica said, we have some questions that we're going to be asking our panel today to sort of dive into this conversation of family programming, investing in the long game. So I'm just going to start with our first question since we're very limited on time today. But as we talk about family programming and how do we invest in the long game, we have to sort of define what that is. What is family programming? So we thought we would let our panelists share sort of their thoughts. What is programming to you and to your organization? So I'm just going to open this up to whoever wants to start first, panelists, with that question.
I'll jump in. So for me, family programming, and again, I'm Christine Cox, and I'm coming from a manager and also producer mindset in how I'm going to answer questions and sort of talk about it. But for me, I think it's real simple. Family programming is oftentimes parents that are looking for something to do with their kids. And when I was producing a show in New York off Broadway, I had a really smart marketing person tell me that my competition wasn't the Lion King. My competition was the bowling alley, a children's museum, even the library itself. And so for me, it's about creating experiences that a family can enjoy together. And also marketing wise, it's something that you might hear about programming from the playground. And that's always, to me, my favorite part about family programming is somebody says, oh, we heard about this show from the playground. So that's that. I'll have a lot more to say, but I want to pass it off to somebody else to share what they think family programming is.
For me, family programming is
generally
thanks, Jess. Family programming is more focused on educational components. So working with schools and students as opposed to engaging the parents. And that's just something that works for our venue. We're in a rural area, and it's always a challenge to reach people kind of for anything. But one thing that we've determined over the years is, I'm going to steal a term from Gary, the foam head shows don't necessarily work for us. So how do we engage the youth in our area? Because again, this is setting up programming for the long game. How do we again engage the youth? And what works for us is working with schools and educational programming and working with just the K through 12 student.
I'm noticing this in the chat, Jessica. Can we define foam heads? It's kind of a lead into Gary there. Because I'm sure he has a good definition of that, and then I can make a comment.
It's Avenue Q for kids. Like Sesame Street, like Fraggle Rock. Anything with a big foam head as a character. Or a puppet. So for me, family programming is really more, which I take a kind of a different tack to. It's more about why the piece was created to begin with. So is the piece for a young audience? Is it for generational ages? Is it for students or schools? I think we can get lost in the idea of like, I don't know. I've seen 1,000 iterations of family friendly, family appropriate, which are just coded language for it doesn't have cursing. There's no drug use, like those adult themes. And so, but for me, it's really more about why was the piece created to begin with? Who is that targeted audience for that particular story? And then I have to kind of figure out where in the world that might fit in terms of us offering it to audiences here. So I don't know that that's helpful, and foam heads fit somewhere in there.
Of course. I'll just chip in and say, for me, as coming from an agent standpoint, I'm looking to represent a magical moment for the young audiences. I really see what we're doing is creating that curious moment where young audiences see the spark of something magical on stage. And now, of course, I think about it, leading back to our sort of title, as a very long game. And if we don't make these magical moments for these for the young audiences today, you're not going to have an audience for tomorrow. And that's the long game of making these moments spectacular, or meaningful, rather, right? Meaningful to the children in the audience. But it's also generally about everybody having a good time, and not, and being able to, enjoy something together, not just for the very youngest, like for the grandparents too, right? From, often I say some of my shows are good for ages 2 to 102, because it should be for everyone.
That's great. That's a great way to start the introduction of it. Of course, we'll open this up to questions at the end, but the 5 of us, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we had a conversation before we kicked this off and talked a little bit about what each venue's family programming looks like. And I know that there's a lot of differences between, maybe Heather, where she's at, Gary, David, any other presenters on this call. So I want to toss it back to David and Gary to just tell us a little bit about what your family programming looks like, what you're thinking about when you're booking it, maybe how you engage your community. Just what does that look like for you guys at your venue?
Yeah, for us, like I said, we're focused on the educational components about cultivating experiences for young audiences that probably don't fit the traditional mold of family programming or young artists. So we will take artists out into schools and have just school assemblies for the schools in our communities. And this is different from the school bus series, which we also do, where we bring schools and traditional school bus series where we put stuff on our stage. But I think there's great power in getting artists out into schools and getting them onto the students' turf. And it takes a little bit more time and money to do that, but I think the reward is probably a little bit higher than just a field trip to the Performing Arts Center. So we're actually bringing artists to you, Grammy Award-winning artists going out into schools. Whenever we do these, we also give these artists the opportunity to, have a main stage performance on our stage. We will engage with high school students and college students to do workshops with those artists and then perform alongside them on our stage. So it's really about giving those students, again, mostly focused K through 12, but we dabble a little bit into college as well. As those experiences with the arts, with music, it sounds totally cliche to say it, but I firmly believe it's true. These are once in a lifetime opportunities for these students to engage with these world-class artists that we're bringing to our venue. And that hits that spark and gets them engaged with the arts. And that hopefully we're laying the groundwork so that in 40 years they're buying a ticket to a Broadway tour, kind of thing. But we've got to engage with the younger audiences, and for us, this is what works. I will say that when we started doing this, so I've been here for 9 years. When we started doing this, taking artists out into schools, we lost money for the first 6 years, but we've been able to capture our story and tell our story and tell the community the value of this. So now we're actually running a profit based on donations that we get. We never charge the schools for these opportunities. We never charge the students for these opportunities. But we're playing the long game, and 6 years in, I can say we're turning a profit, which I don't think many people can say with their educational programming or targeting young audiences. So it takes a while of taking a couple hits, multiple hits. But if you're in it for the long game, I think it can work for you.
Yeah, I think for us, we are everything we're talking about is mission driven. So we're planning on losing money on most family or school shows, and we're very fortunate to be able to support that with a very robust Broadway series. But at the end of the day, for me, we have limited options to be able to go out into the community and do what David is doing. The bandwidth here is hard. It's also hard for us to partner with schools around here because there is still the ground is really shaky in terms of who your contacts are, who might be in a building, and so we're challenged through that lens as well. But generally speaking, for me, we've got a children's theater series, which is public facing. We do 3 to 5 shows a year in that. Typically it's 4. Those are for ages 3 to 11. And usually those also wind up as school shows. A lot of them are page to stage. And then we also do sensory inclusive performances with those as well, which we can talk about at a later date. And then we have quasi-commercial, quasi-mission-driven work. Maybe it's foam head shows like Sesame Street or Paw Patrol or Fraggle Rock or those things when we're able to book them. But at the end of the day, for us, we are just looking at a big picture to try to make sure that we are providing the community with as the biggest variety of things that we possibly can. And as you can imagine, our calendar is usually our biggest enemy in terms of booking and routing. And so sometimes we lose things that I think would be great for the community. But at the end of the day, what David's talking about is really important. It doesn't matter if we're bringing them to the theater or going out into the community. we're trying to create a relationship with those young people and their families in order for them to start a love affair with live theater. And, that's an important mission for Dayton Live, and how we begin to fulfill that is what we're talking about today. And I don't know if you want numbers or not, but we're in a medium-sized city, and so we're probably reaching with schools and with families 30 to 40,000 people a year in terms of just that kind of programming, and it's not enough. So I want packed houses, and we're still building audiences. So I'm sure the other presenters on the call can imagine that.
All right. Thank you, David and Gary, for sharing your insight with us as presenters on this topic of family programming and investing in the long future. And a lot of things that they mentioned that they do probably couldn't happen without the help of different agents that help provide artists to bring into the community. So now we're going to spin it to the agent side and talk about how agents approach family programming as they're working with different presenters and performing arts centers. So Christine or Tara, one of you can kick off, and we'll get your side of the story now.
Christine, you want to go first, or you want me to? Okay. Well, obviously, when I'm finding something, it has to be special, obviously, to me, right? So I want that moment of wow, engagement. We really we try not to represent anything that we haven't seen. That this is the number one. We want to see the show. We want to see its value. We want to know. Instinctively, you figure out who this is for. With Lightwire, that is, generally for 500 seat to 2,000 seat venues. I have other little shows that are really quite charming for smaller spaces. And so you have to kind of think about, who is this going to work for? Like, who is going to be engaged by this? First off, you have to be, drawn to it, and it has to feel important and magical to you. And then you have to figure out who in your network, who are the people that I work with all the time, like Gary, all the time we're working together on different in different venues with different shows. That's kind of where it starts. Christine, what do you think?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I told the panel when I was asked to be on the panel, and I'm so glad that you guys thought of me, was that I feel very much like an untraditional. I think, Gary, maybe you were the one that called me a recovering agent, in that there's a lot of things being on the family side that make this a pretty unviable business model, to just be representing family shows. And for myself, and one of my wonderful artists is on here, Lucas, who was showcased for you guys in Ohio and went to Miami University. So he's got Ohio ties. But really transitioning, I think, for these artists, they're so passionate about working with young people. I mean, that's how they got here. Whatever direction that looked like, somehow along the way, they connected with the kid and realized that their art somehow made the world better for those young audiences. And that's something I'm behind every step of the way. And I've really seen my role have to reverse in how I'm managing those artists and helping them continue to create new work to bring to your venues. And kind of as David and Gary are laying out the different ways that they can present an artist through those outreach, through multi-generational audiences, something that Tara's got a great artist that does a show for babies and whatnot. And, I know I'm sort of here with the non-kumbaya of, there's a lot of problems, even in kids' music. A lot of issues that I hear is that folks don't want to bring independent kid artists because we've trained audiences for years, decades, to only see music in a park for free. So the idea that they would pay for tickets to see a musician performing on the stage that isn't mainstream or on Nickelodeon or something, parents can't fathom it. And it's just because we've trained them that they see that musician for free at their local library or in the park. But one of the other artists I represent, a magician, there's more of that, oh, well, we can pay for a magic show because that makes sense. And actually, Craig, I just went and I looked at our records when the Amazing Max performed for you guys in Findlay in 2020. And I don't know if the statistic was true, but it said that he was the top artist in your family series to date, or at least had sold the most tickets. And I look back at that experience and then back to what I said at the very beginning. And I know I'm speaking in a lot of layers here, but what Craig did really well was there was a whole pre-show and there were 4 local businesses with tables. Craig called me and said, hey, do you mind if an 11-year-old aspiring magician does a pre-show? And so she did 15-minute pre-show. They came to see the Amazing Max. Max does a little VIP meeting after the show, and suddenly parents have 2.5 hours that have been clocked in. All they have to worry about now is feeding them dinner and putting them to bed. And we have done our job by giving parents something to do with their families. And this whole partnership has worked in this kind of seamless way. And so I'm really here to continue the conversation. We so much pause. I don't want to talk about COVID, but like now, how are we really looking at bringing those young audiences in, those families? How are we going to keep artists from wanting to create work for young audiences when resources are so low? And what does that look like from a presenting standpoint? Yeah, I'll get off my soapbox.
And I just want to chip in here and say, not only, are artists, cautious about creating new work for young audiences. New work for young audiences is being scrutinized like never before, right? Like we saw, a tour of a show about a fish, Finn from the Kennedy Center get pulled. And, our fellow agent's been working since August booking that tour. We're feeling especially scrutinized, and we should be cautious and mindful of what that's going to look like. Because, this is just the start. And it's with a very heavy heart, to point this out. And I want to be conscious of how this is going to trickle down to all of us, whether it starts with the choices you're making as a presenter, coming down to the choices I make as, artists that are, very, very much LGBTQIA forward, is this going to be an issue? Am I going to be able to book my artist that's very clearly queer? Like, how is this gonna come down? So that's something else, not to be a total Debbie Downer, but to think about how we're scrutinized in such a way that's fascinating right now.
Yeah.
Please, somebody save me.
Yeah. No, that was great. And it is a nice segue to the next question. So thank you for that. And it's good to bring up, we have to be cognizant and aware of what is going on. I mean, Terry, you're up in Canada, but obviously you're dealing a lot with the States. And so, of course, this all goes into the next question, but for both sides, whether it's not instant, but eventually things have to be financially viable, right? Like, we can love the thing, but if it's not financially viable, neither side can continue to do it. I would assume that eventually somebody's going to stop David from doing family programming if it's a lost leader. So what, and this is kind of a question for all of you, because it's going to probably be a different answer in terms of the agent and artist versus the presenter. But what are you guys doing to create something that is financially, a win I understand going along with your mission as well, Gary, we had that discussion, so please bring that up as well. But how does this become or turn into something that's a financially a stable option for everybody? If anybody wants to kick it off,
I'll kick it off. That's
Gary's
fine.
gonna kick it off. Great.
So here's I think the rub. I think on the presenter side, by and large, what we're talking about, the kinds of shows we're talking about that are non-commercial or quasi-commercial and not, there is a desperate need for the presenter to reevaluate what they consider to be success. The financial piece of this is important, and I'm not discounting that, but I don't see how you could move forward with any kind of confidence that you as a presenter are going to make money on any kind of family programming just to start, right? So for me, that's why planning is so important. And we have a big team here to talk about, and it's really a global picture. It's not really just about one series or show. And those of you who program kind of understand what I'm talking about, I think. But for us, really looking at how we are finding success, how we are cracking through some of the obstacles that are preventing families and schools from getting to the theater. You know, it's the age old, like, well, is it audience development, or is it outreach, or is it engagement, or is it is all those things. And I think we are seeing kind of a trend, at least I am seeing a trend, that is the pendulum is swinging back toward a desire to develop audiences that will continue to come to the theaters. And what are we doing as curators of those spaces in order to make sure that they walk away wanting to come back? And so for us, the idea of success has very little to do with the dollars, and it has a lot more to do with the other metrics of success. How many people, I will give you a quick example. So I just had the Gruffalo's child here. We can talk about the emergency that happened with the show, maybe at a different Tuesday talk. But the show went on, and we do something called Children's Theater Plus, which are activities pre-show that kids can do in the theater. They can make masks, they can make headbands, they make puppets. It's just a way to get them engaged, get the wiggles out, talk about the themes of the show, interact with our staff. So depending on how many people are coming to the show versus the percentage of people who come to those activities is a measure of success for us. And we had 50% of the audiences coming to those activities. And that's a real win for us, because that kind of personal engagement goes a very long way than just a family walking in the theater, in this big theater, interacting with an usher, sitting down, consuming the show and leaving. It's very antiseptic, right? So how can I figure out ways for us to create a different kind of experience for them? And that's just one example of many that we do. So yes, the numbers are important, and yes, the number of tickets we sell is important, and yes, 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 but that's not at the top of our list, which is good. And so I just want to start with that, so that the presenters on the call can sort of just digest a little bit of like, well, how else might I be successful? You know, maybe it's not monetarily, but maybe it's these other things.
It sounds to me like you're talking about deeper engagement. Like, yeah, like a
Yeah,
deep
that's part.
of
Yeah,
engagement.
absolutely.
So just as an example, Christine mentioned, I have this little tiny circus show for babies, and it's called Tweet Tweet, and it's literally for ages 0 to 6. When the toddlers come into the theater, we have little toilet paper rolls that we've kind of glued together. We get them to we help them glue them together, because it's a circus show for babies about birds hatching out of a nest. So they use them as little binoculars, and so the kids wander around and they make their own binoculars, and there's the sense of engagement, something to do pre-show. The show is only 25 minutes because it's babies. And then there's 25 minutes of what we call stay and play. And in this show, it's apparatus, it's hanging, and it's aerial artists, and they have these little baskets that the birds hatch out of. Well, at the end of the show, every child gets a chance to sit in the basket and take pictures. So this is a longer engagement. So there's something for them to do before and something to do after, and it makes that moment. That's a good, I'm not trying to promote this company, but it's just it's the deeper engagement that you're talking about. It's the, are your teachers using the study guides? Are they really prepared? We go to so much work for educational shows to have the curriculum links and the curriculum guides, and that's another way for the audience to get a deeper sort of experience out of the 1 hour performance.
Yeah, for us, I know I mentioned that, things are profitable right now, but if that donation and, grants funding source dries up, does that mean we're going to stop what we're doing? No. So for us, measuring success, it's what I like to call it's participation and stories. So every empty seat in the theater, whenever we do one of these things, is a lost opportunity to have a life-altering moment for an individual. So it's about getting participation. And when we have artists performing with high school students and put them on our stage, we've drastically discounted tickets to only $15. We've rolled out this what we call Pack the Pack series. We are the Performing Arts Center, so we're locally we're known as the Pack. And it's about just filling every seat and giving those students on stage the experience of performing for 1,000 people. So we're reducing the financial barrier to entry. When we do the school bus series that we do, it's $1 a ticket. Right off the bat, we're setting ourselves up for financial ruin because we're not charging enough in ticket sales to even come close to covering the cost of this stuff that we're doing. So it's about increasing participation and then capturing the stories. I've gone out to so many, Rotary clubs, Kiwanis clubs, and that thing, and telling the compelling story of the beatboxing kid. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, we took an a cappella group out into the schools. They had a vocal percussionist. At the end of the assembly, this little second grader comes over to talk to the beatboxer in the group. And I just walk over. I want to see what they're talking about. What is this conversation? And this little kid's beatboxing for this guy. And for a second grader, he was good. I mean, he was really good. And so they had this probably 5-minute interaction. Student goes off. Teacher says it's time to go back to the class. And the other teacher comes over, and you can see she's welling up. She's got tears in her eyes. She's like, that student is the one that struggles with everything. He throws chairs in classes. He, family life's a wreck. Reading's hard, math is hard, and we've never had an assembly like this before. And we did not think that he would be able to get through a 45-minute assembly without causing a disruption. Not only, he was locked in for 45 minutes, but he wanted to go and approach that artist and say, hey, I can see in you something that I can do. That was that light bulb moment for that kid. And so that's the reason we keep doing what we're doing, to create those, what I call magic moments, and capturing those stories. And then it's our jobs as presenters, artists, agents, to keep telling those stories to the community so that they can see the value of the warm and fuzzies. As I said, over time, we've been able to continue to show the impact of what we're having with our local schools, enough so that the community has stepped up with donation dollars to cover our expenses. But we don't judge success by that profit or by the financial dollars, because if that funding goes away, I'm still gonna, this is stuff that we should do. This is kind of, we have to do. Again, it's about the long game, about instilling these magic moments with students so that they want to engage with the arts throughout their life.
That's a great story, David.
It is a good story.
Yeah.
It's so cool that you put something in front of the student that they responded to so viscerally, right? And
Correct.
I think
Correct. And
that's
so when we
Yeah.
do this, it's not necessarily stuff that's geared towards young audiences. Every artist that we've brought in and done this, I mean, we've had Grammy award-winning percussion ensembles. The artists themselves understand it, and they do great educational work. I don't enter into discussions with artists blindly, like, they show up in our city and like, oh, you're going to go out into an elementary school. I mean, these conversations are happening early and often, so that they know what we're wanting as part of their engagement to look like. But it's not necessarily traditional young audiences programming. So any artist out there can develop something based on what they do to engage with the youth. And I haven't run across many that don't appreciate what we're doing from the presenter side to get them in front of young audiences.
Can I add to that, David? So and again, like this is a counterpoint in a way. I think I have also encountered artists who think they've developed educational activities and work and shows, and they're not. They, in a way, have approached it from the I know your audience is better than you do, and it's real easy to sniff that out, but I think for any artist on the call here or on the Zoom, it's good to kind of think about developing a relationship through your agent or through your connection with a presenter to find out what that community really is, where the needs are. Dayton has very different needs than maybe, parts of rural Ohio, and if you're approaching things from a one size fits all, that normally is not going to be very good generally across all communities. So how can you be open to having that conversation with me, to know like, hey, if we have this opportunity to do a community engagement event or an interview or even a workshop, what does that mean and how does that work and how do we make it fun for you and for the attendees? So really lean on the presenter and their staff, because they're going to know. And if they don't know, that's also, you need to smell a rat there too. If they can't answer questions, then that may mean that they don't know. And in a way, that's just information for you so that you don't get into a situation that you weren't prepared for,
Well, and then I think to jump on what Gary's talking about too is, just the way the whole industry is sort of set up, agents versus presenters versus artists. And truly, this is such a collaborative business. And I think we forget that. And I made a joke. I've been making this joke for the last month that, agents, we feel like it's ghosting season because now we're like, hey, do you want to book? And then you're not sure yet, like there's all these layers. And then your, presenters are like, your inboxes are slammed. And it's not even just agents asking you about booking. You're dealing with whatever fire is happening that day, that hour, blah, 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 blah. But I'm always interested in what are the missed opportunities and what could we be doing better with our artists so that you're really capitalizing on that experience. However, we're also dealing with everybody is under-resourced. So as much as David and Gary would love to have all the schools jump on board when the singing zoologist comes to town and have the local zoo jump in, and that reality isn't there. So I take another approach and another project that I've been working on with Quad City Arts. And some of you may have heard me talking about this, but we developed a local artist mentorship program. And that really came out of local artists in the Quad Cities, which is where Illinois and Iowa touch. The local artists felt really frustrated that all of the touring artists were getting all of the work, and why weren't they getting any of the opportunities? And a lot of it just came down to, you all have local artists in your communities and they might not have the resources or be polished. So where are they getting that education, and how are they learning how to develop a show for young audiences? And when I did the program, the most surprising thing was that the folks that that registered to participate in this local artist program were all mid-career. And that's showing my total ageism, where I was surprised that it wasn't just kids coming. I didn't get anyone coming out of college. I got established working professionals who, for whatever reasons, weren't able to pursue their art and make that their main source of income, but they had this longing for wanting to work with young people. And also, I just want to address too what Gary said, that sometimes people think I have the best outreach, and you're like, wow, this was so not appropriate for young audiences. And so where are those artists that really want to create something for young audiences, but they don't have any of that education and resources? So I'm really interested in, one of the missed opportunities is, how can we as arts presenters also in a hyper local way offer opportunities to work with local artists? How can we leverage the artists that are coming into town and maybe they want to try something out? And are there low risk opportunities for that artist that has a great show, but they want to try a new program out? Are there opportunities that things can be facilitated around that? I'm sitting here looking at my notes to make sure. I could go on for this for hours. So somebody jump in and save me.
No, this is all great. And just to kind of put this out there too, for those who are in Ohio as presenters or artists, one of our upcoming Tuesday talks is actually with the Ohio Arts Council. It's on March 11th. And they're also going to be at our in-person networking event on, I think it's May 20th in Newark, Ohio at the Midland Theater. But their upcoming Tuesday talks, which you can register for now, we'll talk about their upcoming grant opportunities, but they offer the yellow school bus, which means, David can utilize that and have those costs covered. There's an Ohio Artists on Tour, which means I believe it's a third of the artist grant as long as they're from Ohio, as long as it's also combined with an educational opportunity. So the things that, David and Gary are doing, they can pull from their sort of local scene, their Ohio regional scene as well, to take these artists on. And the Ohio Arts Council will be discussing that in more detail. So I do want to get to some Q&As. We're coming down to our last 10 minutes, but I have so many ideas now. I think that this young audience conversation is going to continue because there is so much content that I have just from what you guys all said that I think will make a great next session. So be on the lookout for that if you enjoyed this one. I do want to get over to the chat, and then of course we'll open it up, but this was kind of talking based on Tara, what you were talking about, and Cheryl asked, it's more about how these shows and artists get to perform in the States as international artists with the current administration. Work permits will be halted, for all, not just for TYA, but for all international artists. How will you as a presenter feel about only being allowed to book American artists? How will this change your programming decisions? I actually want to open that up to Tara as having a Canadian axe, and then Gary as well. Gary, go ahead, take it away.
Well, I would say from a presenter standpoint, it's not really going to affect booking, because at the end of the day, we can only book what's available. And so if international artists aren't available, then we can't book them. We're going to book something else. So, because the idea of booking is never going away. Do I want to book international work? Of course I do. But the unfortunate reality is that if there is some sort of spigot that gets turned off at the border when it comes to arts, presenters in the States are going to have to continue booking American artists anyway. And so, Cheryl, to your point, I hope that that doesn't happen. You know, we're seeing some of the effects right now, but you know, we'll see how it all plays out. But my fingers are crossed that we're not going to see it completely turned off.
And just to give you guys some context as well, you know, one of the things that happened a few years ago around COVID is our Theater for Young Audiences conference called International Performing Arts for Youth, IPE, kind of, you know, burned to the ground. And one of the reasons that it kind of failed was that there was so much international work that there wasn't enough that was kind of, you know, speaking to the presenters that also need to present national work, like work from the US, accessible, that isn't 15 grand, that is 5 grand, that is, you know, more accessible. So over the last few years, a few of us have been working to recreate a new young audience performing arts conference. And that is to kind of feed what's accessible to people. So keep your eyes out for that. It's going to be called AIA, Arts for Youth, or I forget what it's called. Anyway, we're looking at November 2026 in Pittsburgh. So, you know, if anybody wants to, you know, be in the loop on the new IPE, feel free to get in touch with me.
I would also add to that, Tara, that there is a new collective that has been created here in the States called the TYA Tour Development Collective. There are 9 presenters in the country that are essentially becoming investors in new work for young audiences that are built to tour. And it's in the IPN model for Broadway investing, but the idea is that we're throwing money at these projects so that they can actually get on the road. And so you'll see more about that soon. The first round is happening as we speak. But our hope is that presenters who really want to continue their investment in this work and in their communities, collectively, we have some financial power to make sure that some of this work gets off the ground. So that's also coming.
Fabulous. This is all great. Christine, actually, is that anything what Gary's talking about, what you were talking about with me prior? I know that
No,
we're having the same
totally separate. One of my many TED Talk platform, that's just sort of my insight, my own personal inside joke about you know, anything that I want to soapbox about is, you know, kind of what I mentioned before. I'm really passionate about mid-career performing artists, and also just arts executives, all of you, not just the artists, but I think about up and coming, you know, all of us, the whole ecosystem. And the collaborative is fantastic because it's going to be a curated opportunity for the selection to happen. And I also look at it for various individuals themselves that are seeking commissioning opportunities, whether that's through the Performing Arts Center itself. Lucas, who's on this call, the singing zoologist, and I are looking at models of corporate sponsorship. So we've been very accustomed to having corporate sponsorship that comes directly through the Performing Arts Organization. But what if the artist themselves goes to a corporation and can create that sponsorship directly through the artists and the corporation? And so that's another model that I've been exploring with my artists as well, that we can then bring a more robust programming option to the Performing Arts Center and work on a bigger partnership. So Jessica, you're referencing my curiosity in taking opportunities like this to be speaking with all of you to look at what hyperlocal opportunities are there. How can I work with my artists to find those corporate sponsorships to bring to your cities? And then together, how can we collaboratively deal with the fact that we're all under-resourced and make this a viable way of doing business?
Great. This is great. I feel like this is a wonderful conversation. I know that we're always confined to our little hour here. We've got 5 minutes left. Does anybody have a question that they want to ask to any of the panelists or anybody directly? Well, you know that you can always send me an email, and I'm happy to get you in touch with anybody. My email is info@oapn.org. If there's nothing else, I will.
Can I wait? Sorry. Can I just do one little
please, go
plug
ahead.
just because Josh Benson is on the line and
I have one too.
yes. So we have to do. Josh Benson's on the line. He is one of the hosts of There's No Business Like podcast. And if you don't know about it, it's a podcast created about our business, about the live performing arts, and was really created as a way of, as there's so many transitions going on in the industry, of how are we maintaining institutional knowledge. And they have a lot of conversations, and they're actually reformatting their podcast a bit. So Josh, if you want to drop the link there, Gary did it. Thank you.
And I just dropped the link for Napama's spring retreat that's happening in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's a really great time to sort of, get some professional development, have some fun. We're having a webinar tomorrow about that, and I just dropped the link. Also, Josh will be there. Jessica will be there. I'll look for you, Christine. Erin Miller should be there from Ohio. It's a really rejuvenating retreat. It's just a couple days long. It's not terribly expensive. We got a good rate for hotel, and everybody gets to tour the Thalian Hall in North Carolina, which is going to be absolutely gorgeous. Oh, good. Christopher will be there. Great. I just wanted to, that's my one plug for Napama. Thanks,
Great.
guys.
Anybody have anything else before I end this meeting? Well, then I really want to thank you all. This was a great crowd. You guys were just wonderful. Thanks for taking the time to join us. And of course, thank you to all of our hosts, Christine, Gary, Tara, David, and Craig. Thanks for being the person moving these forward and making sure that we're all getting connected and together to have these conversations. Be on the lookout. If you heard something that you really enjoyed and you want us to focus on that for the future, send any of us an email. But we'll definitely continue these conversations. So again, thanks so much for joining us, and just check back in with oapn.org, and we will constantly be putting up more Tuesday Talks, virtual lunch and learn series. Thanks, everyone.